What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, January 4th edition of FanDuel Tournament Plays presented by Jock MKT. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can find me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And as a reminder, use the code Awesemo, and Jock MKT will match 100% of your first deposit up to $50. Today, we're going to take a look at 5 of the top tournament options on FanDuel. Keep in mind that there's always a lot of moving parts in the NBA. Ownership projections and player projections will change between now and lock. So be sure to check out the deeper dive. Be sure to check out Live Before Lock on our YouTube channel leading up to lock. But for now, to take a look at 5 of the early top tournament options on FanDuel. Number 5, Derek White projected for 12% ownership with a 17% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He's $8,000, point guard only, so that explains why he's relatively low owned. It's a little bit more difficult to get him into lineups than it is some other similar players, but he still has a very high ceiling here. Not an ideal matchup going up against the Toronto Raptors, but he is playing without DeJounte Murray, and that means that there should be a lot of minutes available. There's a lot of assist opportunities available. There's increased usage available for him. And it's just a little bit easier for him to have a big game when DeJounte Murray's not out there stealing a bunch of stats. Number 4, Tyrese Halliburton, 7,500, point guard, shooting guard eligible, picking up a little bit more ownership than Derek White at 16%, but also has a 23% chance of being in the optimal lineup, probably as a result of the fact that he is multi-position eligible and a little bit cheaper. He's got a very good matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. This game should be a track meet where nobody's really playing any defense. Halliburton is a solid fantasy producer. He's not as good, of course, with De'Aaron Fox being back, but still produces at around the fantasy point per minute rate and is likely to play into the mid 30s. One thing to keep an eye on that could be negative for Halliburton is that Terrence Davis is questionable for this game. He's missed the last few. I don't know what his role would be even if he returns. At times, we've seen Terrence Davis, even when he's active, just play like 4 to 6 minutes off the bench and not really impact much of anything. But at other times, we've seen him get a more substantial role where he's playing into the mid-teens. If that's the case, it has the potential to make pretty much all of these Kings guys, Tyrese Halliburton, Harrison Barnes, all of them, just kind of lose a couple of minutes apiece. And you could be talking about 30 to 32 minutes for Halliburton, which obviously would be less than ideal. So basically, the way I view it is if Terrence Davis is out, you can feel very comfortable in Halliburton's minutes. If Terrence Davis is in, there's a chance that Sacramento is simply adding one more body to their rotation, which isn't good for anybody. But there's no guarantee that would be the case either. So I would still roll the dice on Halliburton. It just becomes a little bit riskier. Number 3, Cameron Payne, projected for 16% ownership with a 24% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He's $5,200, point guard, shooting guard eligible. Landry Shamet was ruled out earlier today for the Suns. It's likely that means that Payne can play a few more minutes. The Suns were already missing a couple of other wings and front court members. And so typically they don't want to play Payne alongside Paul for a lot of minutes, but they'll be willing to do it for, a handful of minutes here and there. With Shamet out, I think it becomes increasingly likely that Payne gets into the mid-20s in playing time, and he's over a fantasy point per minute producer at a pretty cheap price tag. Number 2, Domantas Sabonis, $10,000 with power forward and center eligibility. 29% chance of being in the optimal lineup, 29% ownership, 35% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He's still playing without Malcolm Brogdon. He's playing without Karis LeVert. He played about 39.5 minutes in his last game. It's likely you see similar playing time tonight. And while if you look at his on-off numbers this year without Brogdon and LeVert, his production hasn't seen any sort of drastic increase. His rates have gone up in the 2 full games that he has played without both players. And it just makes sense logically that as that sample size grows, you would see Sabonis take on a bigger role in terms of scoring and assist opportunities because he's playing alongside players like Sykes and Washington that just don't play nearly as big a role as Brogdon and LeVert do. So those numbers eventually are going to get there for Sabonis. He looks like he's going a little bit under-owned tonight. And then coming in as the number 1 tournament option, Russell Westbrook, only $9,000, point guard only. He's projected for 31% ownership, but has a 36% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He hasn't taken a huge step forward without Anthony Davis. Most of that production has gone to LeBron James, but a $9,000 price tag is too good to ignore for Westbrook, even on a site like FanDuel where the scoring system really hurts him. The full point deduction for a turnover hurts. The lack of a double-double or triple-double bonus also hurts. But you're still talking about someone likely to play 37 or 38 minutes in a fantastic matchup against the Sacramento Kings at a reasonable 31% ownership for a 5-game slate. So to recap, number 5, Derek White. Number 4, Tyrese Halliburton. Number 3, Cameron Payne. Number 2, Domantas Sabonis. And number 1, Russell Westbrook.